Hello, 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 and welcome back to Dark Academia Queen. Um, Today we are going to be talking about the French Revolution. I know some of y'all have been waiting for me to get to this topic, and I'm finally getting to it. I'm still working on getting to the catacombs of Paris. But anyway, here's the ultimate question. Did Marie Antoinette actually say, let them eat cake? No, they did not. Anyway, if you're new here, hit that like button, ring that bell for notifications, and please subscribe. Help a girl out. I do work two jobs. I barely make rent, so please help out, guys. Please, we could use your help. But anyway, let's talk about the French Revolution. This was a period. Now, this we gotta remember that this was a period of major social and political upheaval in France that lasted from 1789 to 1799. And the goals were to dismantle France's oppressive old regime and create a new society based around Enlightenment age principles as the general will of the people and natural rights. So, what were the three main causes of this? Well, the three main causes would include a financial crisis caused by mounting state of debt, rampant social inequality, and the incompetence of the French monarch in the ancient regime. So, what began the French regime? Well, we know that the French Revolution be- is, began May 5th, 1789, when the meeting of the Estates General. Although there's a valid argument to be made, that it began on other dates, such as the days of Charles in 1788 or the storming of Bastille, July 14th, 1789. So, what ended the French Revolution? It would end on November 1799, with the coup of 18 Brumaire, and is generally considered to have ended the French Revolution. It is the moment when Napoleon seized power in France and ushered the Napoleonic era. So, what are some events that led to the French Revolution? Well, it's important to know that the storming of Bastille by the people, the adoption of the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizens, the overthrow of the monarchy and establishment of the French Republic, the execution of King Louis XV, no, 16th, my bad, the Reign of Terror, the French Revolutionary Wars, and which evolved into the Napoleonic Wars. So, it's important to know that the French Revolution, as I said earlier, was major societal and political uphill in France. And it witnessed a collapse in monarchy, the establishment of the First Republic, which culminated to the rise of Napoleon, and the start of the Napoleonic era. And the French Revolution is considered one of the most defining events in Western history. Now, the Revolution of 1789 is sometimes called to distinguish it from the late French revolutions, originating from the deep-rooted problems from the government of King Louis XVI of France. Um, and they proved to be incapable of fixing. Such events were primarily related to France's financial troubles with all the systematic social inequalities embedded in the old regime. So the Estates General of 1789 was summoned to address these issues and resulted in the formation of the National Constituent Assembly and the body of elected representatives from the three societal orders who swore never to disband until they were written a new constitution. And over the next decade, the revolutionaries attempted to dismantle an oppressive old society and build a new one based on the principles of the Age of Enlightenment. So, and although they had success in establishing the French Republic, the revolutionaries soon became embroiled in the French Revolutionary Wars, in which France fought against a coalition of major European powers. And the revolution quickly devolved into a violent paranoia from 20 to 40,000 people who were killed in the Reign of Terror, including many of the revolution's revolution's former leaders. And after the terror, the revolution stagnated until 1799 when Napoleon took control of the government in the coup of 18 Brumaire, ultimately transitioning the republic to the First French Empire. And although the revolution failed to prevent France from going back to autocracy, it managed to succeed in other ways. It nursed numerous revolutions throughout the world. It helped shape the modern concept um, of the nation states, Western democracies, and human rights. So let's talk about the causes. Most of the causes can be traced to economic and social inequalities that were excavated into the by brokenness of the old regime by the retroactively given the political and social kingdom of France in the last few centuries its initial existence, and the old regime was divided from three estates or social orders: the clergy, nobility, and commoners. And the first two estates enjoyed many social privileges, including tax exemptions that were not granted to the commoners, a class that was made up well over 90%, the third estate that was burdened with manual labor, as well as paying most of the taxes. Now, rapid population growth would begin to a general suffering, and by 1789, France was the most populous European state, with over 28 million people, with job growth that had not been kept with the swelling population, leaving 8 to 12 million impoverished. Now, backwards agriculture techniques and a steady string of terrible harvests to starvation. Meanwhile, a rising class of wealthy commissioners in the Burgundies threatened to privileged positions of the aristocracy, increasing tensions between social classes. And the ideas of the Age of Enlightenment also contributed to national unrest. People will begin to view the old regime as a corrupt, mismanaged, and tyrannical. Hatred with such directed toward Queen Marie Antoinette, who was seen to personify the everything that was wrong with the government. So, let's talk about the French Revolution and the wars. Shall we? This now, a final significant cause for France's monumental state debt was accumulated by the attempts to asset status as a global power. Now, there were many expensive wars and other projects that had put the French in many and billions of debts, but as it had been forced to take out loans at enormously higher interest rates, the country's irregular system of taxation was ineffective, and the creditors began to call the repayment in 1780, and the government finally realized that something had to be done. This is when the gathering storms would start. On May 10th, 1774, King Louis XV of France died in a reign of nearly 60 years, leaving his grandson to inherit a troubled and broken kingdom. He was doomed from the start, let's be honest. But he was only 19, and Louis XVI was an impressible ruler who adhered to various as ministers and involved France in the American War of Independence. Also, the French involvement in the Revolution succeeded in weakening Great Britain, and it also had substantially the France's debt. While the success of the Americans encouraged anti-despotic sentiments at home. Now, in 1786, Louis XVI was convinced by his finance minister, Charles Alexander Coulon, that the issue of the state debt could no longer be ignored, and he presented a list of financial reforms and convened at the Assembly of Notables in 1787 to rubber stamp them. Now, the notables, or most likely the aristocratic assembly, refused and told Cologne that only a States General could approve such radical reforms, and they referred to the assembly that only estate generals could approve this. And they referred to as the three estate. Reese, you scared me, girl. The pre-revolutionary France. A body that had not been summoned in 175 years. Louis XVI refused, or realizing that the Estes General could undermine his authority. Instead, he fired Calonne and took the reforms to the parliament. So the parliament was now. Let's remember the parliament was a 13 judicial courts that was responsible for registering the royal decrees before they went into effect. Consisting of the aristocrats, the parliament had a long struggle against royal authority, and still bitter that their class had been subjugated by the Sun King Louis XIV of France and a century before. Now, spotting a chance to recover um, some power, they refused to register royal reforms, joined the notables, and advocating for the Estates General. When the Crown responded to exiling the courts, riots erupted across the country. The parliaments have presented themselves as a champion of the people, thereby winning the commoners' support. One of those riots erupted in Grenoble on June 7, 1788, and led the three estates of Dauphin to gather without the king's consent. Now, known as the Day of Towels, this is credited to be some historians by the start of the revolution. Realizing that he had been best, Louis XVI had appointed a popular Jacques Necker as his new finance minister, and was scheduled in his Estates General to convene May 1789. So, what about the rise of the third estate? Well, across France, 6 million people participate in the electoral process for the Estates General, and total 25,000 cohorts of Decilents that were drawn up for discussion. When the Estates General of 1789 finally convened on May 5th in Versailles, um, there was 578 deputies representing the third estate, 282 for the nobility, and 303 for the clergy. Yet the double representation of the third estate was meaningless, as votes will still be counted by the estate rather than the head. I'm sorry. Look out the window. There's your company right there's the tea right there. Don't look at me like that. Talking to my roommate's dog here. She really wants to look out the window. And she can jump on the couch. She's just refusing to. I know life is so hard. But anyway, as the upper class was sure to vote together, the third estate was at a disadvantage. Now, so the third estate refused to verify its own elections, a process needed to begin the proceedings. It demanded votes to be counted by head, a condition by nobility staunchly refused. Meanwhile, Louis XVI's attention was drawn away from the death of his son, paralyzing royal authority. And on June 13th, having reached an impasse, the third estate commenced roll call, breaking protocol by beginning proceedings without the consent of the king and orders. On June 17th, following a motion proposed by Abbé Emmanuel Joseph C.S., the Third Estate officially proclaimed itself as the National Constituent Assembly. Now, 2 days later, clergy formally voted to join it, and the nobility but gradually followed suit. On June 20th, after finding themselves and locked in the Assembly Hall, the deputies of the National Assembly met at the Royal Tennis Court. There, they swore a tennis court oath, promising never to disband until they had been given a new constitution. And the French Revolution had begun. So, what do we know about the tennis court oath? Louis XVI realized that he needed to regain control. In early July, he called over 30,000 soldiers into the Paris Bastion. On July 11th, he dismissed Necker and other ministers and considered too friendly and insolent revolutionaries. Fearing the king meant to crush the revolution, the people of Paris rioted on July 12th. And the uprising climaxed to July 14th at the storming of Bastille, when hundreds of citizens successfully attacked the Bastille fortress to foot and ammunition. The king backed down, sending his soldiers away, reinstating Necker. And unnerved by these events, the king's youngest brother, Count d'Artois, fled France with entourage of royalists on July 16th. They were the first of thousands of immigrants to flee. So, in the coming weeks, the French countryside would break into many scattered riots, as rumor of the aristocratic plots to deprive the citizen of their liberties, and the riots resulted in the Bastilles, many Bastilles, as peasants raided the feudal estates, um, and everything. But yeah, there were two achievements that are most important and long-lasting accomplishments of the revolution. What is it, girl? What is it, Woo Woo? Y'all can't see her, but this puppy is adorable. You've done been out. Yes, you have. Yes, you have. Yes, you have. I know it, girl. I know it. I gotta get back to this episode. Okay? I can pet you and talk. But anyway, now the Women's March on Versailles in the October days led to the end of the old regime and the beginning of the France's short-lived constitutional monarchy. And you know, French would go through many revolutions after this, through this whole period. But we also know that Marie Antoinette would write to her brother and say we're trying for help trying to escape and everything, which will led to her being beheaded. And I actually watched a video on like what happened to her children after the French after they were her parents were executed and all that. Well, it turns out her daughter had a very sad life almost afterwards, and she could hear her brother in the cell prison below, prison of not far from her at all, dying and everything else. And then she was married to a ruler who died, and she was just so sad. Like she was very void of emotion about it. Like you could tell she had been through a lot at a young age. But anyway, that is it for this episode of Dark Academia Queen. Join me as we talk about the story of Oliver Cromwell's head next.